Hello, everybody. I'm Hayley.
And I'm Kim.
And this is
the Able Voice Debrief.
Another episode of our Able Voice Debrief series. Today we're talking all about our Explaining Music Therapy episode, and we're joined by two very special guests, Bonnie Houpt-Siniard and Queenie.
Hello.
Yeah, we're so excited to be talking and adding another face to this series. It's great to hear from Kim and I, but I think that it's also great to get other people's perspectives, which is why this series exists in the first place. So I'm wondering, Bonnie, if you have any thoughts after listening to this episode.
Yes, I have a lot of thoughts. I loved the episode. I feel like, it's relatable to every music therapist, and there were just so many good points in there. And one, I think, that really was like a big takeaway is I love how Hayley said to lean into kind of humor, with elevator pitches, because it just got kind of my wheels going about elevator pitches, and I was like, I feel like advocacy is a serious part of our profession, obviously a part of our profession, but there's it can be really frustrating, and I was kind of where's this coming from? And when I thought about it, I kind of landed on two things. And one, I think in undergrad, not that it's not emphasized, but I don't think it's internalized how much you'll advocate when you get into the field. And so I don't know how to help students with that, because I think I was aware oh yeah, I'll need to tell people about music therapy, but it wasn't until you're doing it and trying to even as a business owner even propose it to places where it was this is something that's going to be almost day to day for some people. And you guys were talking about how you guys do your pitches sometimes in a row. I think I luck out where the way I have my business set up, people kind of have to research before they get to me. and they always have questions, but it's not super base level at that point. They've looked into it a little bit most of the time. So every music therapist does their elevator pitch, but I definitely feel like I don't do it as often. So I was that could be really frustrating too, in a row.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think mostly in my degree program, so Kim and I both went to different universities, so we could get different perspectives here. But I think we were taught advocacy from a very professional lens of if you're going in to do a project pitch or an in-service presentation, that is that's what we're taught. That's how we're taught to advocate. And so I think that still carries over into we really want to give that professional pitch even in natural conversation with people. And I think it's a skill that I developed later on is, okay, not everybody wants that scientific definition of what music therapy is. It can be overwhelming for them to hear all of that, or confusing even more so.
Right, and not everyone's going to connect with the scientific definition.
Exactly.
And you guys were talking about, have the very situational music lady, and I feel musical therapy is another one that gets thrown out, and those really don't bother me. I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion, but for me it's yeah, I am the music lady, thank you.
Yeah.
Because it's I at least in my opinion, I don't think people are coming from a place of the music lady.
No.
And I think that's a good point where it's we gotta go into professional mode and advocate, and that frustration can come in, but it's almost how can we connect without this? The scientific stuff is important, it has its place, but in those day-to-day, how can we connect with what they just said, the music lady? They're obviously very interested in music, and how can we connect on that music level, what makes our field so special and cool, and not have to be well, actually, clinically,
What's to define music therapy as?
Because then you're going to lose them, and they were trying to connect with you, at least in most situations. There's probably minority situations where somebody is a little that's your job. But I think most of the time people are just like interested, like, oh, you have a guitar, like, what are you gonna do with that, you know? And then to come from kind of that place of fun versus like like disappointment maybe.
Yeah, and that's the frame of reference, right? So building off of that is a key to connecting with that person and where their knowledge is at, and building on that.
Yeah, exactly. And like being flexible, like you said, to tailor it to that that person. And like you said, Bonnie, it's, I mean, hopefully not coming from that that place of music therapy, but more of that just like lack of knowledge. And so being able to meet them where they're at, to like, yeah, I'm the music lady, this is what I do, to kind of give that context. I think for me, any of the frustration with that term would come if I think that it's like a malicious or a complete lack of understanding kind of thing. But yeah, you're right. If it's just the term and they're excited about understanding what we do, then we can use that as a jumping off point to connect with them and to have those conversations, which I think is kind of neat about how we can share what we do, and that it doesn't have to be, yes, this is the clinical definition every single time.
Right, yeah. And I think my second kind of idea I had about like, okay, so why does like this frustration, almost defensiveness, can come in sometimes with this more casual advocating. And I was like, I think the second reason, and I might be speaking more from like my experience too, but I think people identify with the profession almost too much. So then it's very personal. When somebody's like music lady, it's very personal. And I don't think it's a bad thing to identify, like, I'm a music therapist, and really have that as part of our identity. But I think there's something going on there where, like, you know, we're all passionate about what we do. We all love what we do. So a lot of music therapists, we're music therapists.
Yeah.
And so there's like something there in that identity to maybe be aware of like, again, they're probably not being malicious. So how can we acknowledge, like, this is a way we're responding to the situation, not necessarily how they are.
Yeah, that's come up a lot in general in terms of how much we safeguard this profession. And it's true. We work so hard to, I think I'm going to speak from my personal experience as well. You know, I didn't want to be a teacher, and I didn't want to be a performer, and so I've worked hard to go in a different direction. And so I think when I hear that, I think I understand where that person's coming from, and so it's not often that I'm like having to challenge where that uncomfortability is coming from or discomfort is coming from. But on the days that I do feel that, I know that it's something that is on my end. But also it comes after a day of like, if I've had to say it so many times and I'm just like frustrated at that point. And that again is a response from me and not necessarily from that person. In every situation, there are situations where people do, they're just like, oh, what's the difference?
You have a troll every now and then. You just gotta move on, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think I resonate with that, Hayley, of like, when I notice that I have the biggest response or the frustration or the disheartedness, whatever word that is when I'm either, I've had to repeat it several times, or if I'm just feeling maybe a little burnt out or really tired in that particular week, is when I find it harder to like, or when I find I have that frustration with, why doesn't the world just know yet? But I think... challenging those reactions and really realizing that like this is a part of our field and we'll get there eventually, and hopefully it will become like Bonnie said, people will have that initial understanding, so we don't necessarily have to say the elevator pitch a billion times in a day. But I notice when I am resilient and getting to advocate, like we can have that fun with it, and again lean into that humor and just talk about the field that we do love so much.
Right, yeah, lean into the humor. And I will say, I feel like Georgia, like, I feel like people didn't, like, at least in my area, didn't really know what music therapy was. But then when I moved to Colorado, just like with strangers, there's more often like situations where they know, and it's really cool. And like that can be kind of exciting things to remember too. Like, you might not have to do the whole elevator pitch sometimes, and sometimes you don't have time either. But yeah, I think if we can lean into the humor, kind of have that mindset, and obviously I feel like all these things are easier said than done, especially if you're like in the moment where you're repeating over and over.
Yeah.
But just things to kind of keep working on and be reflective about.
Totally.
Yeah, because neuroscience, like, I listened to a podcast recently where it was talking about how, like, the way you see somebody affects that other person and kind of that relationship going on. Because there's, like, mirror neurons, there's so many things going on. We are built for socializing. And so people can, like, pick up on that, even if you're, like, even if you don't think you're being obvious in any way, still, like, neurologically, biologically, if we have that defensiveness, somebody might sense that, and they might not be aware they're sensing it either, and to just be like really, I guess, conscious of those kind of things, because we can't always control our responses. But to kind of know we're human, we get dysregulated, but to just be aware and just to keep learning and to try to keep it fun, I think is the biggest thing.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
my face is always a dead giveaway.
Yeah.
Like I do not have a poker face.
No?
And if I feel triggered in any way, like I think my professional brain tries to snap back to like, you know, a composed face, but it's like that micro expression of
Right, and you know, micro expressions are a thing, you know, so even if you can get that composure back, the other person's already like processing that you know, it's kind of crazy to think about those, like, you know, our everyday interactions can affect people and how we see other people. So I feel like it's like if we can keep kind of learning to come from a place of like curiosity when somebody asks us like, oh, are you the music lady, and to try to have this like curious response about it, I think then your relationship building, you're connecting, and advocating in these beautiful like one-on-one situations, which is frustrating. We have to advocate it all, but you know, like at least we can have these like moments and really, like I kind of said before, connect on like the music part of it too. One thing that also stood out when I was hearing everybody else's pitches, there was like a physical therapist or a physiotherapist that gave you guys a response, and I thought that was so cool. And their response was like the best. They were like using therapy like to create meaningful lives is how they saw their profession, and would think music therapy's profession too. And I was like, how cool is that? So it's almost like, what definitions are we giving people in an elevator pitch? Or is it super clinical and they're like kind of confused and we walk away? Or is it like, hey, we use music to create meaningful lives, and like, what do you like about music? And like, oh yeah, I use that with this client. And to kind of be like, and that can make elevator pitches more exciting too, if we can almost shift our definitions to focus on the parts of the profession that we are passionate about. And I mean, I get passionate about the science part too, but it's kind of, you got to read the room also, you know? Some people are going to really like the scientific definition. And then other people, that's going to maybe be too much for that quick interaction. So it's definitely reading the room, which can be tricky too.
And it's interesting hearing from so many perspectives as well. It makes me think of maybe we should be listening more to other people, other professionals give their elevator pitches, and, you know, really dive into what it is that they're explaining about how they're practicing, and maybe that will help to reframe how we are then connecting with people when we're giving our elevator speeches, because we want to use language that they feel comfortable with, that they understand, and especially if we're working in like interdisciplinary team settings, it would be great to have that kind of understanding about one another and the way that it can work together.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I mean, I feel like we, as a field, we might feel like isolated, like we always gotta advocate, we have to fight for it all the time, and that's, you know, it's true. We're working on legislation, there's advocacy going on, but you know, other fields still do elevator pitches too. I don't know if I quite understood OT until, like, you know, internship and working with them and being like, oh, and, you know, so they had to kind of explain what they were doing. Because even if there's, like, a baseline understanding, people are always going to have questions on, like, what does it look like? Who do you work with? And so, it's definitely not something that's ever going to go away. Like, you know, everybody explains their job to a certain extent, so it's kind of keeping that in mind, too.
Definitely. And like you said, it opens the doors for future conversations, right? So we have that maybe quick foot in the door. This is what we're sharing, but then we can maybe spark their interest, and they might go do more research, or they might go to talk to other people or want to talk to us more, or other professionals as well.
Yeah. Really interesting.
Yeah.
I want to open it up to you, Bonnie, about maybe if you would like to share your elevator speech with us, or if you have more thoughts to talk about, we can go through that list too. But what direction would you like to go? Would you like to continue talking, or do you have an elevator pitch that you want to share with us?
I think I got most of what I was thinking about.
Cool.
Yeah, so I can go into the pitches. What's interesting is I was reflecting on this, and I was on a podcast, I think it was last January, so a year-ish ago, and basically the definition then I had was a pretty standard one, where I was like, music therapy uses music to work on non-musical goals in a clinical setting by a board-certified music therapist. That's like my... has been my quick one-liner in the past, but I don't like it anymore. So I'm changing it. It's just a little longer, not too bad. So what I would like to tell people is that music therapy is the use of music and relationship to target a variety of goals to promote wellness, facilitated by a board-certified music therapist. So music's still there, the certification's still there, what we advocate for. But I feel like before, my first definition, out of school, was from that kind of place of, I want to be legitimate. I want our profession to be legitimate. I'm very identifying with this. So, if music therapy is not legitimate, I'm not legitimate. And here's my very clinical, medical definition. Yeah. And I've definitely, in my work, shifted from more of a medical model, at least with the clients I work with, to, a relationship-based, humanistic model. And I think it's important to put that in the definition too. It's it's not just music, it's this relationship we're developing with our clients, that we're trained to use music, but also we're there with our clients, we're holding that space, because otherwise, not anyone could do it, but that it's that was in the board certification, but almost to pull that out so that can be explained too, and for me to kind of center that. At least in my definition. So to move from this, I need to be legitimate to, I feel like a relationship-based definition, at least for myself, is kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really like that piece in an elevator pitch, because I think, you're right, not anyone can do it, but it kind of gives, without it, it maybe kind of lends itself to that notion that perhaps people can. And I know we've seen that discrepancy between, okay, what is music therapy versus what is therapeutic music or music entertainment or XYZ, all the number of things. And so I think putting that emphasis too on that therapeutic relationship, music is our means and is our tools, and that's what we're using to accomplish these goals. But that relationship is so important and so central to it. I think it's really important to have that included.
Yeah, I just think it's, and at least in my work, that's a very important aspect. So I want to try to center that in my definition more, of kind of not only are we going to use music, but we're going to use music together. We're going to create this experience together, and that's what makes it so special. It's not just here's a song created by a board certified music therapist, which you can do, but it's there's that relationship piece to it.
Definitely.
It makes it more personal, because then we're bringing in the elements of who we are as therapists and that identity within this casual conversation, and I think that would make it easier for people to connect with and relate with, because we all this is coming together in relationship is not something that's unique to the field of music therapy. Right? It's something that we're all familiar with outside of the therapy space. This is a part of life. It's a human need. And so meeting people at that basic human need level, I think is really special.
Yeah, and you can almost if you have time to talk to them longer, then you could talk. You talk about their music experiences, and and really focus in on that music part of music therapy where that's where you could connect with somebody in the moments and maybe get them more interested to look into it, or like you said, Kim, maybe like talk to you later, you know, but especially in those like little interactions where we don't have a lot of time, I just feel like it's probably more impactful to come from that relationship music kind of space, to leave them with something that really like makes them interested, almost makes them curious too. Because then otherwise you're just like, here's like a clinic, you know, here's a dictionary definition. And they're like, oh, okay. But like, they don't know how to apply that anywhere. They don't know what that looks like. And I can't remember who, but I know on one podcast, I think Music Therapy Chronicles always like ask people their pitch at the end. So I can't remember who, but I remember somebody went into like how they just tell like these stories, and like very like narrative is always like where they go. And I think that's so cool. I think that's probably hard to do, like when you're like in those really quick interactions. But I think that's like the right idea too, like of like finding something to connect with that person with, and then to show them like how cool music therapy is too, because you can leave them with a story that's going to be something they remember, maybe more than music therapy, like the definition. So maybe, what did that person say? What did that music lady say about the music something, and it's clinical, you know, or if they're like, oh yeah, they used music to do this story with this, and you know, they might just even remember it more. It might
have that more personalized impact that people, I mean, we know that we retain knowledge more easily when it is connected and personable. So you're right, leaving that story or that impact, or when they can really feel your passion versus the da here are all the words that I know I'm supposed to say.
Right. And I want to validate again that like this is all easier said than done,
for sure,
when we're thrown into situations and interacting with people. But I think there's strategies at least to try to even make it less frustrating, like at the very base level, to like not only probably advocate a little better, if we can have them take away something more, but then also like to make it less frustrating. Here are just some strategies, because it's a big part of our field, and it can be frustrating. So, you know, to everyone watching and listening, if you're like, okay, but like when I actually see somebody, I don't like, I'm gonna probably spit out the definition, like, you know, that's okay, and to just be aware and maybe play around with some of these ideas too.
Thank you so much for being on our debrief series. It's been lovely chatting with you. Always lovely chatting.
Always. Thank you. It's always lovely chatting with you guys. Thanks for having me on. I was so excited about this conversation, and I always look forward to new episodes too. So I was like, yes, I get to be back.
Yeah.